Hello and welcome back to Redirecting. I'm going to be talking about the difference in how drug epidemics have been handled in this country. Now, we know that by design, crack cocaine was placed in so-called black communities, and the way it was treated was quite differently than how they are treating the present drug epidemics. But what I want to do first is roll a very, very short clip, and I will be right back.
Finally tonight, a NewsHour essay. As we reported earlier, President Obama today announced plans to expand drug treatment centers and increase the use of drugs that reverse the effect of opioids like heroin, OxyContin, and Percocet. Communities across the country are developing new approaches to this epidemic in an attempt to support addicts, helping them into treatment instead of arrests. New York's Cardozo Law School professor Ekal Yanka compares today's approach to heroin users to the tough-on-crime response a few decades ago to those using crack cocaine.
That Kroger, the Midwestern grocery chain, has decided to make the heroin overdose drug naloxone available without a prescription is a sign of how ominous the current epidemic has grown. Faced with a rising wave of addiction, misery, crime, and death, our nation has linked arms to save souls. Senators and CEOs, Midwestern pharmacies, and even tough-on-crime Republican presidential candidates now speak with moving compassion about the real people crippled by addiction. It wasn't always this way. 30 years ago, America was facing a similar wave of addiction, death, and crime, and the response could not have been more different. Television brought us endless images of thin, black, ravaged bodies, always with desperate dried lips. We learned the words crack baby. Back then, when addiction was a black problem, there was no wave of national compassion. Instead, we were warned of super predators, young, faceless black men wearing bandanas and sagging jeans. No matter how far from our lives crack was, we're guilty by association. By the time I was in college in the early 1990s, my short dreadlocks meant older women would cross the street to avoid me. African Americans were cast as pathological. Their plight was evidence of collective moral failure, of welfare mothers and rock-slinging thugs, and a reason to cut off all help. Blacks would just have to pull themselves out of the crack epidemic. Until then, the only answer lay in cordoning off the wreckage with militarized policing. Today, police chiefs facing heroin addiction are responding not by invoking war, but by trying to save lives and get people into rehab. Suddenly, crime is understood as a sign of underlying addiction rather than a scourge to be eradicated. One former narcotics officer said, "These are people. They have a purpose in life, and we can't look at it any other way." But he couldn't quite put his finger on just what had changed. His words reflect our collective self-denial. It's hard to describe how bittersweet many African Americans feel witnessing this. Glad to be rid of a failed war on drugs? Yes, but also weary and embittered. When the faces of addiction had dark skin, the police didn't see sons and daughters, sisters and brothers. They saw brothers, young thugs to be locked up, not people with a purpose in life. No one laments the violence the crack bomb set off more than African Americans. But how we respond to the crimes accompanying addiction depends on how much we care about those affected. White heroin addicts get overdose treatment, rehabilitation, and reincorporation. Black drug users got jail cells and just say no. It would be perverse to want to go back, and this is not just about racial guilt. The hope is that we really can learn from our meanest moments. This stark moment gives us the opportunity to quit our dedication to ignoring racism. Next time we, or even you, are faced with an indictment of institutionalized racism, maybe we can swallow the knee-jerk dismissal or the condescending finger-wagging and imagine if you would accept such treatment of your own. We don't have to wait until a problem has a white face to answer with humanity.
Now, as you see, the gentleman in the video, he pretty much explained everything as to what we see happening. He explained that there is this great hypocrisy that we see where with the crack epidemic, which was something that they actually started. They started it, but their response to what they started was a war on drugs, which essentially accounted to a war on black people and black families. That was part of the destruction of the black families, which was to put crack cocaines in our communities. Now, on this drug epidemic that we see, you have white populations that are being affected by these drugs. And so what they're doing with them, they don't have a war on drugs. What they have now is support. They're saying, let's get some treatment centers for these people. We've got to help them. We've got to support them. We've got to let them know that they are not alone. They're not being criminalized in most cases. Okay. But that was totally the opposite of what happened with the crack cocaine epidemic, which they started. And so we see a stark contrast in how things are handled. Now, we understand because biblical prophecy already showed and told us that these things would take place. So we see a lot of hypocrisy, and this hypocrisy is so overwhelming that sometimes it's hard to even fathom how to navigate through all of this. That is how overwhelming it is. But this is what we see happening, where with this group, you criminalize, arrest, tear apart families, do all of this, and you demonize these people, and you make it seem like they are just so horrible because of a drug that was planted by design. It was a strategic placement of these drugs nationwide. But then over here, where you have people, again, families are being destroyed. People are just, some are overdosing. Some people are losing their lives. But for those who are not, they are not being demonized. They are not being ostracized. They are not being criminalized. But there is this support that is being offered. There is this love. There is compassion. But there was no compassion, and there is still no compassion for a black body in the same condition of being addicted to drugs. And so that is just another highlighting of the hypocrisy that we see in this country. I find it amazing that the documentary that we did, White It Out Part 2, it has been banned worldwide. Not shocking, because that's what the enemy does, is they hide their tracks. They don't want people to see what they've done. And that particular video, White It Out Part 2, was called Background Check on the White Man. White It Out Part 2, Background Check on the White Man. And what I find amazing is a lot of the information in that documentary were actually white people spilling the beans on their own deeds. Not all of it, but a whole lot of it, the majority of it. And so these are tales that they don't want told, especially when you are compiling it into a DVD. They don't want these tales to be told. But it is what it is. The truth is out there. No one is blind to it. But I guess when you present it in such a way to where it's just all in your face, there is no denying it, they say, okay, we've got to squash this. But it's sad and unfortunate, but this is the world we live in, where you demonize one and you support the other. And in their minds, it's all fair. But we know at the end of the day, there is no fairness in a reprobate. Okay? With that, I'll say shalom. Be sure to ring the bell to be notified of new uploads on this channel, and also comment, share, like, and subscribe.